We haven't spent enough time in Romans.
Yes.
So we're going to do some Romans 3
Yeah.
clobber passaging.
Yes.
Clobber passaging.
Yes, that's a verb.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're going to start with Romans 3:23.
Okay.
All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Right. And, all have, again, that seems sort of clear.
Yeah.
And the tendency, I think, on the part of people reading this is to say, listen, all people have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, like on an individual basis, which may or may not be true, but that's probably not what Paul means by that, because he's really about, Romans, if it's about anything, it's about who makes up the people of God. Rome, it's Jews and Gentiles that seem to be in the same church. And the question is, Jews, Gentiles? Gentiles, Jews, and Paul's saying no, Jews, Gentiles on the same level. And the whole letter is really oriented towards that because Paul begins with things like for the Jew and for the Gentile, for both, right? He puts the Jew first because they were there first, and he's Jewish. He's recognizing the chronological priority of Judaism, and now the Gentiles are grafted in, but they're grafted in. See, there's no two-tier. And it's wonderful how he begins the letter with listing what are basically Greek sins, like idolatry and this and that, and men are lying with men and women with women, exchanging what's natural for what's unnatural, stuff like that. And Paul is focusing there on the Greek problem, right? The Greco-Roman problem. They'll have sex with anything. They'll worship anything. They worship the creator, the creationist of the creator. And you can hear, like with the tensions that were probably at that church, you can sort of hear in the background the Jews saying, go get him, Paul's one of us. He knows he gets these guys are scoundrels, right? But then he gets to chapter 2 and Paul shifts gears entirely. He's going to keep those gears shifted to like almost the end of the book, where he says, but you who have the law, really? You think you're that good? You don't even believe what it says. You don't even do what it says. The Gentiles do better than you do because they have the law written on their heart. So he's basically started rhetorically by getting, I think, his fellow Jews on his side, sort of like, so they'll listen, by knocking the Greeks down a peg and they're sort of squirming. And then in chapter 2, it's time for the Greeks to start cheering a little bit and saying, get those guys too, because they're so high and mighty, they think they're just because there's this, they think they're closer to God, whatever. And so when you get to chapter 3, this verse, when he says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, it's really best, if you want to understand Paul's argument, you have to take the word all out and put the word both in, because that's what he means. He means both groups have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, what does it mean to fall short of the glory of God? That's not the easiest thing, but probably it means something like, that's Adamic theology, like Adam. They've fallen short of the full glory of what humanity should be, right? By their sin. And what is the sin? Well, again, Paul doesn't explain that at this point, but he just sort of takes it as a given, because every Jew believed that there was sin. Like sin is a reality, so he doesn't have to defend that. So, that really is the context of Paul. And he keeps arguing along those lines about how Jew and Gentile are together and they can't be divided. And within the church, if there are people who don't have a problem with eating, unkosher food, right? They can do it, but don't do it in front of people who have a real problem with it, because you're just sort of like, you're using your freedom to knock them down a peg. You're doing this top down. Yeah. Keep it even, right? Yeah. So I guess, the big point here is that the book of Romans is not a book to outline how individual people become Christians. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's writing to Christians who are Jewish and Gentile and saying, how can you be one people without the animosity, which is so natural to us? Yeah. And especially since he never met them, he was never there. He's sending Phoebe ahead with a woman who sent a letter, which, by the way, a lot of scholars think since she delivered the letter, she probably read it in front of people, which is interesting, isn't it? So, but it's not sort of the Romans road idea that people are sometimes taught. It's Paul's systematic theology about how to go to heaven. Go find that in Romans and get to the end, and you see where Paul is. When he gets to chapter 12, all the theological stuff is before. Chapter 12, he starts talking about the unity of the body. That's the climax of the letter. The whole point of this is to get to the point where, see, this is what it means to live together, And, your life is a living sacrifice to God, where you put down your own desires and your own likes for the sake of the other, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you live a Christ-like life among you, so that of any place in the world, Rome, the center of the world, let the Church of Christ get along and not bicker.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's a very, very powerful message. And it makes so much more sense of Romans than thinking about Paul's all of a sudden interested in just individuals and how they go to heaven after they die. Paul's really not interested in that question. Paul's question is, what do the people of God look like right here and right now? Because this has to go forward. And if the two worlds are not reconciled and brought together, then this isn't real.
So what you were referring to, what I heard, was those predestination passages towards the end of Romans. But what you're saying is that both that passage and the one in Romans 3 would have actually been used to promote unity in the body because it equalized the Greeks and the Jews.
Right, to equalize the two parties. And, when God predestines, right, it's not predestining individuals.
Yeah.
It really seems to be predestining the Greeks God has predestined the Greeks to be a part of the faith of Abraham, And you might not like that, but is the clay going to tell the potter what to do? I mean, that's the point of that. And he then quotes things from Hosea in chapter 8 and 9. He quotes Hosea, which about predestination, but Hosea is clearly talking about Israel as a nation, right?
Yeah.
So and Gentiles as a nation. So. To me, that's a very powerful thing. The point is, the thing that's so offensive is that you mean those Gentiles as Gentiles without converting to Judaism, they are equal members in the faith of Abraham. And Paul goes, yeah, that's the whole point. Now, remember, Gentiles, don't get cocky about it because they were here first. You're grafted in, and you can be ungrafted too. But this is what God has brought together, right? And that is, to me, that'll preach, as the Baptists say, right? That's something that really is worth talking about in different cultures and different contexts. How do we not have the disunity? And I tell my students at Easter when we talk about this stuff, the closest thing that I can think of is like maybe antebellum South, where the rich white and the slave black, and Paul is saying you both belong equally in God's eyes, and no one is over the other. How would people have reacted to that? Not so well. And in Paul's day, I think generally speaking, I don't think the Jews reacted very well to this either. They didn't really catch on. Judaism continued its own way, and then Christianity became a Gentile religion. But I don't blame Jews for not catching on, right? Because you're asking them to say that something about their ancient tradition has been morphed and transformed by a crucified Jew who rose from the dead. Yeah, I didn't see it. Paul says, well, I saw it and 500 people saw it, right? You're asking a lot of those people, but that's the point. And the point of all this for Paul was not make me king. As hard as Paul is sometimes, for Paul, it's really not about him. It's the unity of humanity under Christ. And that's the point, right? And I think we lose that message completely if we sort of reduce the book of Romans to basically an evangelism pamphlet, which is not what it is.
Yeah, that's so good. It definitely changes the way you see, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
For both have sinned and fallen short.
For both have sinned. Thanks,
You weren't listening, were you?
I didn't go to Harvard.
And cut, and scene.
Oh, that's good.